Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten here, bringing you a new Nancy Drew analysis video. Today's video is brought to you by the patrons over at Mystique Manor and by all the official fellow detective channel members. If you too would like to support the channel and gain access to exclusive features, check out patreon.com/wizardkitten to become a patron, or click join next to the subscribe button to become an official fellow detective. In honor of spooky season, I decided we were due for a spooky Nancy Drew analysis video. The Nancy Drew PC games are a bit of an underrated gem when it comes to scare factor. While so many video games rely on gore, horror, or jump scares to frighten players, the Nancy Drew games typically take a more subtle approach. Several of the games feel creepy and spooky purely because of excellent environments, and others present scare factor in understated moments where detectives find themselves wondering if they did in fact see that swan head move. But of course, there are some Nancy Drew games that are more forward with their scare factor. Thankfully, most of these scary moments are incredibly effective, but which ones are the best? Today, let's talk about the top 10 scariest moments in the Nancy Drew series. If you're interested in seeing my ranking of the scariest games, you might be interested in checking out my collab video with Carter of the Nancy Drew Times on his channel and our collab video on my channel. But those videos talk about the games as a whole, not the individual moments. So what makes for a good scary moment? There are three major factors in my opinion. Number 1, surprise. The moment needs to be shocking to be most effective. This is why, despite its attempts to be scary, you won't see any Midnight in Salem on this list. Midnight in Salem made the mistake of announcing every single moment that was supposed to be scary, which meant that they weren't scary at all, because they were entirely expected. To effectively scare someone, they need to be surprised. Number 2, atmosphere. The scary moment should be surrounded on all sides by a spooky or creepy atmosphere. The atmosphere effectively sets up the scary moment to be at its best by putting us in an unsettled and susceptible mindset. We're talking dim lighting, spooky fog, creepy music, all the good stuff. And number 3, execution and timing. Just like comedy, a good scare is all about timing. By choosing when to move the camera, add a sound effect, or jolt an object, the game designers are able to craft the most exceptional scary moments. Before we continue, a fair warning that I will be discussing specific scary moments from the following Nancy Drew games in no particular order, which means that they will be spoiled for you if you have not yet seen them. Curse of Blackmore Manor, Legend of the Crystal Skull, The Captive Curse, Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake, Ghost of Thornton Hall, Shadow at the Water's Edge, and Haunting of Castle Malloy. You have been warned. And without further ado, let's get started. Number 10, Nancy's Nightmare in Curse of Blackmore Manor. This moment can sometimes be difficult to trigger, which is a shame because it is so incredibly spooky. At night, while sleeping soundly in her pitch-black medieval room in Blackmore Manor, Nancy starts to hear spooky voices and creepy sounds. On the top of her 4-poster bed, she sees flashes of Penvillains long since past. Then the grand entrance hall of Blackmore Manor appears in black and white. A mysterious figure with glowing eyes looms in the window, threatening and growling. Then Nancy awakes to echoing calls of her name alone in the dark. Detectives have the option to wander the halls of Blackmore at this point, but at their own peril. After a nightmare like that, I'd be a lot more likely to hide under my covers. Number 9, surprise Charlotte in the hall in Ghost of Thornton Hall. I'm not sure if this is always the case, but this is always the first Charlotte haunting I trigger when I play the game. Since it is the first time we see Charlotte in all her glory, it's especially terrifying. The air feels thick with crackling tension as she slowly looks at us, then approaches, eerie wailing and singing all around us. For me, it's the fact that she walks towards us that absolutely sends chills down my spine, because Nancy can't run away. We just have to stand there, watching as the scary specter approaches. Number 8, Banshee Attack in Haunting of Castle Malloy. Fairly early in the game, after enough snooping in Fiona Malloy's eerie, cobweb-covered nursery, a terrifying shriek rents the air. Nancy abruptly turns to look out the window and is confronted by a flying, angry, screaming figure in white tattered cloth and with silvery streaming hair. As the Banshee reaches out to us, Kyler enters just in time, her scream of terror scaring the Banshee off. But oh boy, the sight of her in that window gets me every time. Number 7, Skeleton Man Attack in Legend of the Crystal Skull. This is a great example of how setting up the atmosphere does wonders for a scary moment. The game warns us to play in the dark, immediately setting the scene to be unsettling. As Nancy approaches the steps of Beaulieu Manor, the storm rages on, rain falling, thunder crashing, lightning flashing. The front door creaks open of its own accord, and Nancy steps into the dim rooms. She sees someone in the foyer, but when he turns, she realizes he is in a skeleton man costume. The thunder crashes and the power goes out, leaving Nancy in complete darkness. When the lightning flashes once again, the skeleton is inches from her face. An excellently executed jump scare. With some sort of voodoo power, Nancy is knocked unconscious. Very spooky. Number 5, Ghost Dogs Attack in Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake. It's the timing and setup of this scary moment that is practically flawless. Nancy has just gotten off a terrifying phone call with Sally where she begs Nancy to leave, then cuts out. Then Red Knot acts like a super creep and howls outside the house before telling Nancy the ghost story of Mickey Malone and his dogs, the full moon shining and the leafless trees of the forest silhouetted against the night sky. Just as he finishes his story, the ghost dogs howl in the distance, and Nancy gets the heck out of Dodge into the house. Then the haunting begins. Lights flicker, the dogs crash against the house, they bark at the windows, their eyes glow, they practically knock things off the wall with the force of their attack, and then Nancy rushes upstairs to hide under her covers until morning. The only rational decision, really. Number 5, Monster Attack in The Captive Curse. There are several excellent moments with the monster in this game, but my favorite is when we receive an alert that the monster is in the courtyard for the first time. Nancy, being Nancy, rushes right into danger to see for herself. The monster is standing in the courtyard, slowly looks over its shoulder, then starts to stomp away. Once again, Nancy, being reckless, rushes after the monster and gets herself trapped in the gate. Things look pretty dire, but then, bam! The monster leaps out of the forest, which certainly makes me thankful that we were trapped behind that gate. At least it provided some protection against the snarling, growling, very angry beast prowling in the woods. Number 4, Arrival at Blackmore in Curse of Blackmore Manor. Just like Crystal Skull, this is another fantastic setup to a scary mystery. The game begins with Nancy just outside the gates of Blackmore Manor. They creak open to reveal a pitch-black garden, light pouring out the windows of the manor, and yet barely illuminating the darkened grounds. Nancy slowly walks up the stone path to the manor. As she reaches the door, a growl rumbles to her left. Nancy looks, but nothing is there. She pulls the large metal knocker to announce her arrival, but the creature to her left seems perturbed. It growls her name, and glowing red eyes glare at her from the garden, threatening. At that very moment, Mrs. Drake answers the door, the glowing red eyes disappear, and detectives are left with their hearts absolutely pounding. Number 3, Charlotte in the Walls in Ghost of Thornton Hall. Of the many terrifying Charlotte hauntings, this one always gets me the most. Towards the end of the game, Nancy looks through the peephole in the secret passageway connecting Charlotte's room and the drawing room. She's supposed to be looking to ensure that Clara is out of the way, but who does she find instead? Charlotte. Very close. Charlotte, of course, notices that Nancy is watching and immediately walks towards her, practically shoving Nancy away from the peephole. But the scary moment continues when Nancy turns around and Charlotte creeps out of another wall, practically reveling in the terror she inspires. She leaps at Nancy once again, fully solidifying that we are not safe in this house and that it belongs to Charlotte. Number 2, Kasumi Confrontation in Shadow at the Water's Edge. At the very end of the game, detectives must solve a massively difficult nonogram puzzle that reveals Kasumi's will. This puzzle can take upwards of an hour to solve and requires incredible focus, which means that it's extremely surprising when the puzzle is solved and our focus is immediately broken by a ghost attack. This moment is absolutely horrifying. The ghost is right up in Nancy's face. It grabs her by the shoulders, it swings her around, and then it holds her underwater under a rope net in an attempt to drown her. This is insane and so scary. It's so shocking and an absolutely thrilling way to close out the Yuri storyline. But we're not done with the Yuri yet, because at number 1, we have the mirror scene in Shadow at the Water's Edge. This is the perfect scary moment. Nancy cannot go into the baths right away when she arrives at the ryokan, so it feels particularly special and exciting when she can. As Nancy enters the baths for the first time, everything seems fine, until the lights start to flicker and Nancy moves to the mirror. It's so subtle at first that it takes a second to notice, but in the corner of the mirror stands a woman, pale as death, with her head lowered, her black hair falling in wisps. Nancy turns to look at the woman, sees nothing, then returns to look at the mirror, but the woman is now looking up. Oh boy. Nancy gasps as the woman moves with surreal speed in a jagged, aggressive pattern, breaking the mirror as she smashes into it. Holy moly, the first time I experienced this moment, I screamed out loud and was absolutely terrified to return to the baths. What a fantastic, horrifying, brilliantly executed, scary moment. So there you have it, fellow detectives, my top 10 scariest moments in the Nancy Drew series. It's probably no surprise that Shadow at the Water's Edge clinched the top 2 spots, or that Ghost of Thornton Hall and Curse of Blackmore Manor also nabbed 2 spots. The rest of the included games also do a fantastic job overall with scare factor and have some truly terrifying moments. There are also other scary Nancy Drew games that weren't represented on this list, like Message in a Haunted Mansion and Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon. While these games are super excellent and spooky in their own right, they prioritize more of the subtle scare factor that I mentioned previously. This type of scare factor is actually more to my personal taste, even if it isn't as obvious as games like Ghost of Thornton Hall or Shadow at the Water's Edge. Finally, a little honorable mention to the real 2 scariest moments in the Nancy Drew series, the Ethel Bossany and Deirdre Shannon jump scares. I'm referring, of course, to the intentionally terrifying moments where Ethel Bossany appears out of nowhere in Curse of Blackmore Manor and scares the bejeebers out of us, and the unintentionally terrifying moments in Midnight in Salem when Deirdre follows Nancy around like a lost puppy and is never further than 2 inches away from her shoulder. Those are the real terrifying moments. But what do you think, fellow detectives? What do you think are the scariest moments in the Nancy Drew series? Do you agree with my rankings? Let a Wizard Kitten know in the comment section down below. If you really enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that like button or tipping me for the video with a super thanks next to the download button right beneath the video. If you would like to come join a fantastic group of fellow detectives at Mystique Manor as a patron for the channel, gain access to exclusive content, and support the making of more content like this, please check out patreon.com/wizardkitten. I also have channel memberships with exclusive badges and emojis to use during streams and in the comment section. If you'd like to support the channel by becoming an official fellow detective, click join next to the subscribe button. Please feel free to follow the channel on Instagram or Discord, linked in the description box down below. And as always, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more Nancy Drew and Cozy Game content. Thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. I will see you soon.